most famous man in human history, has a secret. For 18 years, 18 entire years, Jesus of Nazareth simply vanishes from the record. The Bible tells us about his birth. It gives us one story when he's 12 years old. And then, nothing. Silence. Until he suddenly reappears at age 30, walking out of the desert to change the world forever. So where was he? What was he doing? Who was he becoming? Tonight, we're going deep into history's greatest missing person case. And I promise you, some of these theories are going to blow your mind. Stay with me. Let's start with the last confirmed sighting. Jerusalem, the temple, Passover. A 12-year-old boy goes missing for 3 days. His parents are frantic. When they finally find him, he's sitting among the greatest religious teachers of his time. Not just listening, but debating them. Grown scholars, stunned by a child. And when his mother scolds him, he says something chilling. "Didn't you know I must be in my Father's house?" Then Luke's gospel closes the curtain with a single line. He grew in wisdom and stature. That's it. That's all we get. Now here's the question nobody asks. Why would the gospel writers leave this out? Think about it. If you were writing the biography of the most important person who ever lived, wouldn't you want every detail, every year? Unless the silence itself is telling us something. Some scholars say those years were simply ordinary. Too ordinary to record. Others believe something happened during those years that the early church didn't fully understand. And a third group? They believe Jesus wasn't even in Nazareth at all. That he traveled far. And that's where this story gets absolutely wild. The Greek word used to describe Jesus is tekton, and here's what most people don't know. It doesn't just mean carpenter, it means builder, craftsman, stone worker. And 4 miles from tiny Nazareth, the Romans were building an entire city, Sepphoris, a massive construction boom. Historians believe Jesus and Joseph likely walked there every morning, cutting stone, raising walls, working shoulder to shoulder with pagans, soldiers, and slaves. Imagine that. The Son of God, with calloused hands, sweating under the Middle Eastern sun, building homes for Romans. But then Joseph disappears from the story, too. Sometime during those hidden years, Joseph dies. The Bible never mentions his death. He simply stops appearing, which means Jesus, likely as a teenager, became the man of the house, feeding his mother, providing for his brothers and sisters, running a business, burying his father. Let that sink in. Before he ever healed the sick, he grieved. Before he preached about the poor, he was poor. The missing years might be the most human years, the years that made him understand us. But not everyone accepts this quiet version of the story. Because in 1894, a Russian journalist dropped a bombshell. His name was Nicholas Notovich. He claimed that while traveling through the Himalayas, he broke his leg and recovered at a Buddhist monastery in Ladakh. And there, monks showed him an ancient manuscript about a saint called Isa. According to this text, Isa left Israel at age 13, traveled the Silk Road to India, and spent years studying with Hindu priests and Buddhist monks before returning home at 29. The book exploded across the world. Jesus, in India, studying in Tibet. People were electrified. There was just one problem, and it's a big one. When scholars went to verify Notovich's story, it collapsed. The monastery's head abbot, he said no Russian with a broken leg had ever stayed there. No manuscript matching his description was ever produced. Max Mueller, the greatest Orientalist of the age, tore the story apart. Even Notovich reportedly walked back his claims. Case closed, right? Not quite, because decades later, other travelers, including a respected Hindu monk, claimed they too saw documents about Isa in Himalayan monasteries. To this day, no one has ever photographed them. So is it legend, fraud, or a fire hidden under smoke? It gets stranger. Here's a theory with actual biblical roots. Egypt. Remember, Jesus' family fled to Egypt when he was a baby, escaping King Herod's massacre. Egypt was home to Alexandria, the intellectual capital of the ancient world, with a massive Jewish community and the greatest library ever built. Some early traditions claim Jesus returned there during the missing years, studying, learning, absorbing wisdom. Even his enemies later hinted at Egyptian connections. The Talmud itself contains cryptic references linking Jesus to Egypt. Coincidence? Maybe. But there's one group much closer to home that might hold the real key. A secret desert brotherhood. They were called the Essenes, a mysterious Jewish sect living in the desert near the Dead Sea. The same community connected to the Dead Sea Scrolls. They rejected wealth. They shared everything. They practiced ritual washing, baptism, years before John the Baptist made it famous. And speaking of John the Baptist, some scholars believe that he may have been connected to this movement. So the theory goes, did Jesus spend his missing years among the Essenes, learning scripture in the wilderness? It would explain so much. The baptism, the 40 days in the desert, the radical teachings about wealth. But here's what the evidence actually says. Let's be brutally honest for a second. There is zero verified historical evidence that Jesus traveled to India, Tibet, or joined the Essenes. What does the evidence support? Something quieter, but maybe more powerful. When Jesus returns to Nazareth and teaches, the townspeople are shocked. They say, "Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son?" Notice what they didn't say. They didn't say, "Where has this stranger been for 20 years?" They knew him. He'd been there. The mystery might not be where he went, but what was happening inside him. And that's the twist nobody sees coming. Because here's the thing that should keep you up at night. For 18 years, the man Christians believe was God incarnate waited. He watched corrupt priests exploit the poor and said nothing. He watched Rome crush his people and did nothing. He had the power, according to Scripture, to heal every sick person in Nazareth. And he hammered nails instead. Why? Why would God spend nearly 90% of his earthly life in total obscurity? The answer might be the most radical idea in this entire video. The waiting wasn't wasted. The waiting was the mission. Think about everything Jesus taught. He talked about seeds growing slowly in secret, about houses built on rock versus sand, builder's language, about fair wages, corrupt managers, lost coins, family debts, the daily grind of working-class life. His parables weren't composed in an ivory tower. They were forged in a workshop, at a dinner table, in a small town where everybody knew everybody's business. The missing years weren't missing at all. They were the training ground. Every lesson he ever taught, he lived first, in anonymity. But there's still one unanswered question, the one that changes everything. What made him finally leave? Picture it. He's 30 years old. He's spent his whole life in Nazareth. Then one day, word spreads, a wild prophet is baptizing people in the Jordan River. And something in Jesus says, it's time. He puts down his tools. He walks away from the only life he's ever known. The business, the security, his mother, his home. He walks into that river as an unknown carpenter and comes out as the most influential figure in human history. 3 years later, he'd be dead. He knew that. And he walked into it anyway.
So what really happened during Jesus' missing years? India, Egypt, a desert monastery, or a dusty workshop in Nazareth? Here's my honest answer. The evidence points home. The ordinary, extraordinary years of a carpenter becoming ready. But the truth is, no one alive knows for certain, and maybe that's the point. The silence forces us to ask a better question. Not where was he, but what is being built in my hidden years? Drop your theory in the comments. India, Egypt, Essenes, or Nazareth. Subscribe for part 2, the 3 days between his death and resurrection. That story is even darker.